What's good, everyone? So today is a video that I have really wanted to make for a long time, and it's a more general video on what does bodybuilding, what does training, what does fitness, what does the gym mean to me? You know, am I natural or not? All these kind of questions. I suppose I'm treating this as like a 1,000 Instagram followers special, and I want to say thank you so much. I find it very difficult sometimes to articulate properly just how much some of these like individual achievements mean to me. But this for me is a really major milestone, and I thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much, for watching along, for the fact that you're interested in it. And I'll continue to try and do my best, God willing, to make the best content that I can. But to start, I'm going to provide a little bit of background and a kind of journey into fitness for me. How did I get into fitness? Why do I lift the way that I do? What do I prioritize when I'm lifting? So first things first, my journey into lifting. I would say that I've looked at my body and sort of thought about how I wanted it to look, and ways in which I can improve it and wanting to be better in that kind of a sense. Probably since I was about 7 or 8 years old. My earliest memory of that was when I was in year 2. For the Americans, I think that might be like first grade. It might be third grade. But the point is anyways that I was very young. And this basically just came from me reading loads and loads of superhero stuff, like watching loads and loads of superhero shows, being inspired by them and wanting to see that and kind of wanting to emulate that and really just respecting what they did and just finding that to be a really great source of motivation. I feel like oftentimes the conversations around body image and being aware of body image at a young age are so negative. But in all honesty, I never really felt like mine was negative. I never really looked at my body and hated it. It was more always a thing of just, I want to be better. I saw these guys doing great things, and obviously like they're older than me. Like, as in, I looked at superheroes and I recognized the fact that these guys are not 7 years old. And I feel like I remember looking at Miles Morales and he was 13. And I remember thinking like, wow, like, and like, he's only like a couple of years older than me and I can probably get to them. And I think this comes into like, I wouldn't say delusion, but what I said in the last video was basically about allowing yourself to be inspired by certain things. A lot of people don't allow themselves to be inspired by things that aren't real. They're fictitious. They're drawn perfectly. I mean, these guys are literally drawn from anatomy books to make them look as good as possible. But I feel like when you're gunning for something that's that high, without me even realizing at that young of an age that was what they were, that was how high a standard was set. I was just, exercising as best I could, to do that. I would do like push-ups at home. I would do sit-ups at home. I would just do general kind of exercises at home, to try and get stronger, to try and get faster and all that kind of stuff. I really enjoyed athletics. I've competed in athletics basically up until my last year of secondary school where I got injured, and that will come into it later as well. But yeah, like it's been a really big, fitness has always been like, I feel like a pretty big, significant thing that I've enjoyed and big part of my life and something that, I've always enjoyed and done. One of my teachers in primary school put me onto Dragon Ball Z, and so I started watching from there. Obviously like, the guys in Dragon Ball Z, they train all the time. And so that was another source of inspiration. I used to do the Dare B workout, which was like a full body workout on YouTube, where it was just like push-ups and sit-ups and punches and all this kind of stuff. Because again, that was just another way in which I wanted to get fit. When I got to secondary school, I started playing rugby. I loved rugby. Rugby was like my favorite sport, and I don't know if I ever really wanted to go pro. I just had a couple of goals in mind. I wanted to go to the Wellington Festival, which was a tournament that used to run for all of the academies in the United Kingdom, like all of the Premiership academies. And I wanted to play for England under 18s. I think those were probably my 2 biggest goals. So when I was in year 8, I trialled for Harlequins because they were like my school's local academy, and I played in their DPP for like 4 years. My 15 season got cut short because of COVID, and when I got to 17, it wasn't really like a head injury. So naturally, like, my parents were concerned about the whole like head injury, CTE risk and that kind of stuff. And so I had to stop playing when I was 16 or 17, and I might make another video about that, because that I thought was quite significant, a moment for me. I joined the academy when I was 12. I left when I was 16 in pre-season for year 12. And then in the middle of this, at the age of around 14 or 15, my school had a gym connected to it. And so I started going to the gym with a bunch of my friends. We kind of started training together. But I would say for them, like, they would always train together. And I think, I don't know, at that age, it was kind of strange. I just didn't really tend to train with them. Sometimes I would, sometimes I wouldn't. I wasn't always there whenever they were training, and why that was, I'm not sure entirely, but, I developed a habit of training by myself. I'm 21 now. And like I said, I started when I was probably 15. So when I was 14, that's when I started going to the gym, but we were only allowed to do cardio at that age. When I got to 15, we started being allowed to touch the weights. I was competing in athletics regularly, and I was also playing rugby, and that was sort of my main thing. And so the way that I trained naturally was geared around those things very, very specifically. It was not very bodybuilding style at all. I would do the bench press and I would work on my squats for explosiveness, but besides that, I was basically just doing cardio and general athleticism, as opposed to like gaining size. Like I said, I stopped playing rugby when I was 16, and that was a huge blow to me. At that time, it was my biggest ambition sports-wise. It was my biggest ambition, probably life-wise as well. So my year 10 and year 11 seasons for athletics and rugby were both cut out because of COVID. Not long after coming back from COVID, that was when I had my injury, and my parents basically asked me to stop playing. And so at that point, my biggest sporting ambition, all the time that I spent in the gym, had been geared toward this thing, and it was gone now. And so I tried to make the transition into athletics more seriously, because I did athletics, but it was never really something that I took all that seriously. My year 12 season was like okay, kind of mediocre, but I was really, really hoping that in my year 13 season that I'd be able to put in so much more time in the off season and training and stuff that I'd be able to really, really show out. I get back to my year 13 season, we're doing some sprint training. So I'm running on a dirt track and I basically pop my toe and I get turf toe. It can be like career ending for like football players, American football players, all these kinds of sports injuries, because it means it's really, really difficult to generate force off of your feet. And that was where I thrived. My twitchiness was my main area of my game. So that went. Once I left secondary school after year 13, like that was that. When my gap year rolls around, because I didn't get into medicine first time, and I started going to one of the county gyms near where I live, I basically just started doing bodybuilding. Shizzy was one of the first people that I watched that was like, you know, I would watch him regularly. And I remember the first time I saw C-Jack's back, and I thought to myself, like, how is this even possible? Like, those were probably the two most prominent examples that I could think of. I got a job near where my gym was. So I would work in the evening at this job at the passport office. I would go around the corner, literally like 2 minutes, and then I'd go to the gym for an hour, and then I'd go home. It was really, really convenient. I went to the gym every day whenever I worked. When it came to posting, from when I was about 15 or 16, I'd had a Snapchat private story kind of talking about fitness and posting about it and talking about how many reps I'd done, the exercise I'd done, and my physique. Like I said, I was very, very lean all throughout school, and so I kind of wanted to improve on that. And I would never say that I was geared towards getting size, but I definitely had, you know, some goals in mind of like, oh, I want to be X big. A few of my friends throughout this time must have said to me, you know, you should consider posting. I had actually started posting on TikTok, gym and fitness stuff, and similar content to what I'm doing now, but I feel like my mindset was very, very different. I kind of wanted to just go viral and get big. I went to a Gymshark event later that year in my gap year, and I got really, really embarrassed because there was a push-up competition. They said I didn't do the push-ups right, and I was doing it for ages, and I couldn't hear anyone because I had headphones in. And so in my mind, I was like, I'm not cut out for this whole like gym stuff, social media. It's not me at all. When I now started to try again, about a year ago this time, I went into it more so with the mindset of I am treating this like an archive. And like I say all the time, that's why the name is 42 Burners, because it was like a burner account. It was like, you know, God forbid if I have to get rid of this thing, overnight I can get rid of it, like it's okay. So I started posting, and slowly over time we've kind of got to where we are now. And that is really my journey into bodybuilding. I feel like health is the biggest benefit for me in the gym. You know, I didn't really notice the size gain, to be honest, until other people started saying it. And obviously the strength gain is really, really helpful. But I think that the health implications of just having more muscle mass are really some of my biggest attractants in the sport. I've touched on this before as well, but I really do view bodybuilding as an art form. I think when we refer to it as a sport, it takes out a certain level of beauty that there is in bodybuilding. I often think about the great thinkers of like very, very old. I don't know how this archetype of like nerds being really, really skinny, or people that are very, very academically inclined are super, super skinny and don't take care of their bodies at all. Because if you think about the great thinkers of old, like Plato literally just means wide. Yeah, I'm not sure how much truth is in this, but apparently when Plato was in arguments, like he would literally just flex. And if you think about the sculptures of great thinkers of old, if you think about the way that great thinkers of old are portrayed, these are people who understood the mind and the body as indivisible entities. One of my favorite things that I've read, and I suppose it really well encapsulates why I think that bodybuilding is so valuable to me is The Night by C.S. Lewis. So he has a book called Present Concerns, and the first essay in Present Concerns is about the necessity of chivalry. And I can't quote him exactly because I can't remember. But in short, he says that the knight is a man of blood and iron. He's someone that's familiar with the sight of lopped off limbs and, carcasses, but he's also ladylike and demure in hall. He's fierce to the nth and meek to the nth. And meek in this context is, based on the Greek word praus, which is used to describe a horse that's under restraint. And so it has strength and it chooses not to use it. And I found this really, really beautiful and really quite fascinating. I think the idea of being a man who is incredibly physically capable, but also very emotionally capable and mentally capable is something that I've always really, really valued. I think a few people have messaged me about it, but this is why I think I'm not so heavily inclined towards bodybuilding and competing. I would love to compete as maybe one day, but it's not really a major goal of mine. I'd say that's probably the best way to describe my attitude towards it. And the reason for that is just that it's never been about that to me. Toiton Ekundayo is like a really, really, really crazy natural lifter. If you don't know about this guy, bro, like I don't know where you've been, but like you should definitely check him out. But he captioned a video and he spoke about how even though he competes, building a timeless physique is really what matters most to him in this bodybuilding that he's doing. And I would say that is probably the best way for me to describe my attitudes, my thoughts and my beliefs about bodybuilding. It's not necessarily about the accolades. It's not about getting a pro card or coming first in this competition. I understand that all of that stuff is relative to the time that you're in. How we have conversations about how Flex Wheeler isn't as great a bodybuilder as like Ronnie Coleman because they competed at an era and a time where mass was prioritized over aesthetics. And yet we talk about Arnold in the same conversations or Sergio Oliva in the same conversations as Ronnie Coleman. Is ridiculous to me. I think people have really lost the ability to look at physiques objectively and appreciate the art in them. I think we need more artists in bodybuilding. Before I started posting about bodybuilding, I was really into fashion. I still make clothes now. I still design clothes now. But I think that compared to a lot of other lifters, I have a very, very artistic background. And I feel like more lifters should appreciate the art of bodybuilding. And that's why I think I like golden era bodybuilding so much. Mike Mensa is the one that gave me that quote about understanding bodybuilding or understanding man as an indivisible entity of body and mind and the necessity of building up the body as well as the mind. I would argue that the mind is probably more important. Paul speaks about how physical training is of some benefit, but how physical training is of some value, but godliness has value in all things. I suppose that relates to my spiritual life as well, and I speak frequently about my spirituality and my relationship with God and Christianity on this channel. By the grace of God, I'll continue to. But I think that when you view bodybuilding too much through the lens of a sport or something as that is a competition with other people, you get this really bastardized version of the sport. You don't get a true and pure perception of it. The reason I like golden era bodybuilding so much is because of their attitudes and their understanding about bodybuilding in the more broad scheme of life. These are not people that spent their entire lives necessarily in the gym. These are people with other hobbies, with other interests, other passions. These are people that, weren't trying to look like science experiments. They were just trying to create an elevated human ideal, an elevated human form. And I think over time, when bodybuilding started becoming less artistic and people started appreciating bodybuilding less as an art form, it became, just how big can I get? And this isn't to say that the Mass Monster era and the people in the Mass Monster era didn't appreciate bodybuilding as an art form, but I think that the way that the people that weren't inside of bodybuilding don't have that insight to sort of see how much they can appreciate it. It isn't as clear. I think anyone could watch Pumping Iron or read about golden era bodybuilding and get a general idea and concept of how artistic it was at that time, about how much artistic emphasis there was in bodybuilding. I think as you transition into the more Mass Monster era, that disappears. And I think that's when people start to prioritize things like longevity less. I really think that Lee Haney was one of the last major competitive bodybuilders that understood bodybuilding holistically, and understood it as it pertains to all areas of life and not just the competition side of it. You know, what kind of value can be extricated from bodybuilding? What kind of things can be used to improve people's lives from bodybuilding? It's not just how big can I get. That was, you know, very clearly, I feel, demonstrated through his training style. Lee Haney trained hard, you know, but ultimately he understood that his goal was to stimulate and not annihilate the muscle. And I think my views on health, my view on bodybuilding from this lens is also why I'm natural, you know, shocker. Side note, if you look at my physique and you think to myself, oh, he's not natural, you've got no idea the kind of things that people can do. I thought I would expand on this a little bit more in post, but essentially what I'm trying to say is that I am bottom of the barrel when it comes to natural physiques in the grand scheme of things. You know, I could go onto TikTok and find 1,000 people with a better natural physique than me, people that train harder than me, people that work harder than me. And if your fear, your worry, your doubt is that you see a physique like mine, which is like entry level into the grand scheme of, you know, good natural physiques, and you think to yourself, you know, I don't know if this is natural, I don't know if I can make it, and that puts you off from wanting to achieve your goals, that's when I say I don't think you ever had it in you to make it. All of my earliest physique inspirations were from comic books and TV shows, and these guys are not real, so how much more someone that is real before you is flesh? If that's your concern, that like, oh, you know, I'm discouraged because this natural physique is great and I don't know if I could ever make it, I don't think you're ever going to. Because you need to have that level of unwavering belief, irrespective of whether they're natural or not, to have something to aim towards. My apologies for the scenery change. My camera's been dead for like the past week. But I'm going to finish off this video talking about natural, why am I natural, why do I think it's important to stay natural. So like I've said before, I am natural, I'm a lifetime natural, and by the grace of God, I always will be natural. I think that bodybuilding for me, and what it means to me, the reason that I use it is just to improve the human form. Like, it's to exaggerate the human form. It's to improve and like idealize the human form. And in my mind, steroids take away from that self-improvement aspect of bodybuilding and switches it into the competitive aspect. People say it all the time and sometimes they don't actually mean it, but I really do believe that with bodybuilding, my goal is to be the best possible version of myself. I don't view steroids as something that is compatible with my idea of self. I think the principle just of using hormonal assistance kind of, you know, doesn't really appeal to me. I think the health implications, long-term health implications, especially because I'm so young, but even if I wasn't young, I think the health implications are a massive detractor for me. And I also think that my idea of a dream physique, what I hope to achieve with my physique in terms of the long term, can be achieved naturally. So why would I cheat? Why would I use something to make the journey, you know, artificially easier? Now you can talk about things like optimizing diet comparably. You can talk about, well, you know, why do you train at all? You know, isn't optimizing your diet, isn't taking vitamins, isn't taking creatine a form of cheating? To that I say no. I mean, I suppose everyone draws the line at their own point, and I think that the idea of natural or not isn't as definitive as some people might say. And I think that with peptides, they're just so new and so unreliable and so untested. We know so little about them. Why on earth would I go and take them? For the same reasons that I wouldn't take steroids, but also the fact that these things are super, super untrustworthy. Like, it just seems sketchy to me. I completely understand for things like injury recovery. And who knows? I mean, if I had a really bad injury, I could definitely see myself taking certain peptides that had been tested and I trusted to help recover from that injury. But I haven't, and I don't really need to. And so for the time being, my stance is that I will always be a natural, and I will always remain a natural, because I think that that is where that it captures the essence of bodybuilding for me, and it captures what it means to be a bodybuilder. But yeah, this has been one of my favorite videos to make. By the grace of God, this is probably going to conclude this format of video, and I'd like to move more into a series, so stay tuned for that. I'm really, really excited for it. God bless you all. Thank you so much for watching, and let's graft harder.